Hi, and welcome back to TrainSignal and a lesson focusing on central access rules and central access policies. In this section, we're going to be able to take the ideas we've explored with conditional permissions and carry them forward into deploying them out throughout our group policy-based server environment. So we're going to be able to multiply the effect of these very interesting conditional permissions and our work with claims and with resource properties and make them very effective on a large scale. We're going to focus our attention on a couple of important ideas. First, something called central access rules. The rules give us access to essentially the same kinds of permissions we built individually on individual files, but I'm going to create them in the Active Directory Administrative Center so that I can deploy them out to targeted file servers. In doing so, I'm going to configure a set of permissions that are targeted at specific resources. I can use my resource properties to calibrate which particular files or folders are going to be affected by these permissions. And I have the interesting opportunity to either make them current permissions, make them effective right now, or to make them proposed permissions, in which case I'll be able to do auditing on the likely success or failure attempts of users interacting with my proposed permissions before I even make them take effect in my environment. Having done that, we'll shift gears into central access policies. Central access policies are the containers by which I can deploy one or more central access rules out to my server environment. So we're going to put these rules inside of a central access policy. We'll associate the central access policy with a group policy object, and wherever that group policy object is effective, whichever sets of servers I deploy it to, those servers now know about and will be affected by my central access rules. So let me jump over to server 1 and we'll get started on deploying central access policies. So here I am on server 1, which is where I'm going to find the Active Directory Administrative Center, which is the starting point for all of my dynamic access control manipulations. Inside of which we'll find our starting point, central access rules. The rules provide the logical starting point because I'm going to be bundling rules into policies, and then I'll deploy the policies via group policy. So here's my starting point. I need a new rule. The rule is going to accomplish the job of turning on a particular security policy that our IT organization has decided is wise. And in this case, it's to secure something called PII, Personally Identifiable Information. And I want to make sure that PII, information that identifies who somebody is in a way that they might rather keep private, will only be accessible to members of our management team. To make that work, I need to be able to know when I'm looking at PII and when I'm not. And for those of you that have taken the lesson on claims and resource properties, know that I'm talking about essentially a resource property there. Well, I went ahead and built a resource property for PII, Personally Identifiable Information. There's one that comes with the built-in dynamic access control feature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my target resources. I'm going to tell this feature that I want to only apply this if the resource that I'm looking at has a PII property. Now I can do a couple things here. I can either check to see if it exists. If it has any setting at all, then I'm going to lock it away for only managerial use. Or I can say that it's any one of the list of values that lie inside of that particular resource property. This resource property comes with a low, medium, and high level of PII, plus one that is not PII, and one that is public. Yeah, it's personally identifiable, but it's designed for public consumption, so it's not a huge deal. So it depends on how I want to manage it. So there we go. So if a file meets those criteria, then I want to deploy some permissions. And what we're looking at the moment is a set of proposed permissions. It's suggesting that I might want to consider deploying this set of policies. One that calls for owners to be able to have full control access, administrators to have full control, the operating system itself to have full control. That seems pretty reasonable. These are settings that we would see ordinarily on most NTFS formatted files and folders anyway. So there's nothing terribly surprising there. But what I do want to do is I want to supplement this. I want to be able to add an additional rule to the list of rules that we're deploying. And in this case, I'm going to set a rule that says managers, people in the managers security group, will be configured so that they will have modify permission if their user's department property is equal to the resources department property, if the resource property matches the user claim. If those things line up, then we're good. Then we know that the user is somebody who we trust to have access to that particular kind of departmental document. I could potentially build others with and or relationships, but I don't need them in this case. I'm just going to go ahead and remove that, and on we go. So there's my proposed permissions. I can just make them current permissions, saying I want to put them into effect right now. If I leave them as proposed, I can do something very valuable. I can do auditing of that information. I can put the rules into effect, but only as a view option. I'm able to view the effects of those permissions without the permissions actually affecting real users. I wouldn't actually be restricting users so that they can only access this if they were managers, but I would see the audit logs, the security log entries, as if they were. Neat trick. I'm going to OK that change. I've now built that rule. Now something kind of interesting here. If I go back and look at the properties of that, we have the current permissions, and separately we have the proposed permissions. I could, if I wanted to, add yet more proposed permissions and test them out, enabling permission staging. Beyond that, I can take those proposed permissions and apply them, move them to current. Or I can build a set of proposed permissions that include the current permissions and then build something new on top of that. I can roll back to previous permissions that I had built inside of the essential access rule if I chose to. So there's a number of neat things that I can do here. Having built the rule, my next step is to build a policy. I cannot directly deploy central access rules in group policy, but what I can do is I can build a central access policy where that central access policy includes one or more central access rules. I can give it a name, and then I can deploy this central access policy through group policy. Okay, so I've got the policy. The policy contains a rule. I like the rule. I want this to take effect in my server environment. To make that happen, I'm going to jump to the Group Policy Management Console. So I'm going to close out of Active Directory Administrative Center. I'm going to build a GPO to deploy the central access policy. And here in my Group Policy Management Console, I'm going to build a new GPO. Of course, I've already got a GPO for Dynamic Access Control in general, but let me build a GPO specific to Central Access Policy functionality. Inside of which, I want to tell my file servers that we're going to do the Dynamic Access Control thing. That's done this way. Computer Configuration, Policies, Windows Settings, Security Settings, File System. And inside of my File System node, I've got an area here labeled Central Access Policy. There's no items in there. If I right-click, it gives me the option to manage Central Access Policies, in which case I can choose the one or more policies that I want to deploy to this set of file servers and add them to the ones that are applicable, the ones that I'm going to put into effect. I can see my policy does include my personally identifiable information available only to department managers. So we're in good shape there. So we've taken care of the server side end of this. The domain controller is happy. It's got its settings configured. We've configured group policy to make that setting available to server 2. Now we're going to jump over to server 2 and finish things up on that side. So we're over here on server 2. We want to put into effect the central access policy that we made available through group policy over on server 1. So the logical place to go would be to go look at how this affects the permissions. So if I go right-click my folder, go to its properties, go to the security tab, go to our advanced permissions. I don't see anything about central access policy. I see regular old permissions and auditing, effective access. Those are things we saw in older version NTFS back in earlier releases of the OS. Where's this central access policy thing? Well, I haven't told this computer to be able to go get configuration settings from the group policy environment. Let me do a GP update. I'll use the /force switch just kind of out of habit. I almost said bad habit. I'm not sure. The /force switch says download the settings even if they haven't apparently been downloaded recently. Regular old GP update is technically what a background refresh does. Every 90 minutes to 120 is the typical average for client machines and member servers. Okay. There we go. Having done that, let me close and reopen this GUI. And hey, look at that. There's a new tab there that wasn't there just a moment ago called Central Policy. And in it, I have the ability to choose which of potentially several central access policies I want applied to this folder. Like NTFS permissions, these things inherit hierarchically down through their folder structure, so applying it to the folder will apply it to the files that lie inside. So I've turned on my PII manager restriction policy that includes the PII accessible just to department managers rule. The interaction between regular permissions and central access policy is one that can be a tad confusing if you're not expecting it. The best way to think of it is somewhat like the relationship between shared folder permissions and NTFS permissions. You're probably aware that in the shared folder NTFS environment, if the shared folder permissions give you full control, but the NTFS permissions only give you read, you only get read. Even though the shared folder wanted to give you a broader set of permissions, the NTFS permissions say, no good, you only get this. Central access policy cannot add new permissions to your abilities. All it can do is further restrict them beyond what the shared folder permissions and the classic NTFS permissions are already doing. It's almost as if we're just adding new additional rules beyond our classic NTFS permissions. So if I were to include a central access policy that says, everyone, full control, well, that doesn't do me any good because NTFS is already limiting our permissions to a certain something. In this case, I've got system with full control, I've got administrators with full control, I've got the owner, whoever creates something in this location, with full control, and I've got users with read and execute permissions. So ordinarily users are able to read this information, but we're going to turn some of this content into PII, personally identifiable information, and suddenly it's going to disappear from the reach of ordinary users and will only be in the hands of managers. So my central access policy is in place. It deploys a set of rules that allow owner, administrator, system to have full control. Same thing as over there on the regular permissions tab. Allow managers modify. Remember that we're essentially combining, from a certain point of view, permissions and central access policy. It's just an additional layer of security. And in the same way that shared folder and NTFS both need to let you do what you want to do. When central access policy is in place, in order to perform an action, you need to be covered by all of regular permissions, shared folder permissions, and central policy permissions. So in this case, we will only let users read if they are also covered by an appropriate policy over on this side. So administrators get full access. Managers here I've given modify permission if the departments match. Now that I think about it, choosing modify there doesn't make an awful lot of sense. Seeing how this folder only permits read permission in general to people, we'll see that our managers will in fact only have read in this circumstance. But that'll do for our purposes. That'll illustrate the point. So I put that permission into place. Let's test it out and see that it behaves the way that we would expect. I'm going to jump over to my client computer and connect in as Nelson Portier. So here I am on the Windows 8 client, currently logged in as Nelson. Nelson wants to gain access to that set of shared resources. He's going to go /NYC server 2 / building 6 security policies, and he wants to read the security officer contact information. Security officer is reachable at such a number. If there's no answer, then call the officer on her cell phone. Her personal cell phone. Now that's personally identifiable information. The security officer might not want people to know her personal cell phone. So maybe we'll adjust that. So let's see what happens if we change the permissions, if we change the classification of this document to reflect the fact that it is PII. It's personally identifiable information. So I'm going to close this up. I'm going to jump back over to server 2 and configure the permissions over on that side. Back here on server 2, I'm going to go configure classification information for this folder. Actually, I'm going to do it just specifically for that one particular document, because only this one in particular has PII in it. So I'm going to right-click, pull up its properties, classification, and I'm going to classify this document as personally identifiable information. I'm going to say this is maybe mildly sensitive PII. but nonetheless, that's enough to trip the rule that I put into place. Having done that, let's go look at things from the client side. On the client, I'm going to go back and try to open this file a second time. It says, no way. It's got personally identifiable information in it. I now cannot gain access unless I am the manager of the department for that particular document. Well, what department does that document think that it's part of? Let's go back and look at the server. Back here at the server, we see this document classifies itself as part of the information technology department. Okay, Nelson's not in IT. Nelson's in the legal department. So what if I were to change this document so that it reflects the legal department? Suddenly now when I go back and look at the client, we should see a different experience. And Nelson's going to open up the security contact information again. It worked because the claim that Nelson presents, saying that he is part of the legal department, is the same name as the resource property set on that document. And the central access policy is deploying a central access rule which says only those for whom those two pieces of data match are able to read this document. Now, I had said that he's not able to change it. Managers are able to modify is the rule that I applied, but that's within the context of an environment that says authenticated users or users are only allowed to read. Let me try to make a change and see if it sticks. No good. It's not letting me make the change. That's good. It's offering me to save my own copy of it, which of course is not the same thing as editing the file that lives over there on the server. It's offering me to save my own copy on some other drive that I've got access to, but of course that's different. So let me cancel out of that. We've successfully accomplished that. Now, something interesting worth drawing your attention to. When we tried to connect in and failed, we got a standard, ordinary, access denied sort of a message, which is okay. It's not a bad thing to tell somebody, no, you can't get in. But think about what the typical reaction will be from the average user to that situation. What are they going to do with that information? They're going to call the help desk. The help desk is going to say, I have no idea about that, probably. Or they'll try to hand it off to somebody who's a server administrator for that server. Well, that's not the person who's in charge either. The person who should be making the decision is the content owner of that particular document, who's responsible for managing that piece of data. That's the person who should be handling the permissions. So how can we get the request to fix the problem into the hands of the person who's responsible for solving the problem? There's a feature for that. It's called Access Denied Assistance. It's brand new to Server 2012, and it's a very, very valuable bit of functionality. Let me show you how it works. I'm going to jump back over to my Server 1 because I want to deploy some more group policy settings. This is a group policy driven feature. So I'm going to jump over to Server 1. And here in Server 1, I need to create two group policy changes. I need to make a change that will affect the file server that's going to be deploying this new custom error message. But I also need to make a change at the client side to allow it to receive that information. Let me do both of those things. Let me go to the client side. I'm going to build a new GPO here. Access Denied Assistance lives in a different area than we've explored so far. This is going to be found in Computer Configuration, Policies, Administrative Templates, System, Access Denied Assistance. And there are two components that we care about. The one for the client computer is this one. Enable Access Denied Assistance on Client for all file types. This is telling the client computer that it's okay to request a reason why when it gets told, no, you can't access that. This is, again, as you saw there, a Windows 8 only feature, at least as of this release. Let's see. So now we're going to do the same thing for the server side of this. I'm going to go to my servers OU, build a GPO there. Now I'm being a little liberal with my GPO creation efforts here. The best practice is to create a relatively small number of GPOs with a large number of settings inside. That processes more efficiently than a large number of GPOs with a small number of settings in each. But for the time being, to illustrate the point, we'll do it this way. The server-side configuration is the other option in this same Access Denied Assistance portion of my group policy object. It allows me to customize the error message being used in a case where somebody gets an access denied message. So I'm going to enable this feature, and I get to display a message that says something like, "You have been denied access because of inadequate permissions. Please contact the owner of this content for assistance." Now, ordinary user would look at that and say, well, who's the owner? How am I going to possibly find that person? Well, we can actually give them a shortcut. We can enable the user to request assistance. That'll prepare to send an email to the owner of that folder, to the administrator of that file server, or to other individuals. There we go. So we can add some text at the beginning of the email, or at the end of the email, to let the recipient know that this is provided by group policy. Neat. As an added bonus, I can include claims information in that email to let the person who receives this message know exactly what the information was like that described the user at the time that they were unable to connect in. So there we go. I've configured a server-side setting. I've configured a client-side setting. Both of those are attached to their correspondingly appropriate OUs. To be able to make those take effect, I just need to do a GP update on the client and the server to apply those changes. I don't want to wait 90 minutes, plus or minus half an hour, so I can see them take effect. So let me jump over to the server, and then we'll jump over to the client. Here on the server, we're going to do a GP update. While it's doing that, I'm going to go back and reset the department information back to the way that it was before. I want to make sure that we're able to successfully lock Nelson out again when he tries to connect in. So I'm going to reclassify this document as distribution department, and we'll see that that should be enough to lock him out. Update's done on this side. The server now knows that it's able to participate in assistance of the sort that we described. We do the same thing on the client side. So here on the client side, I'm going to do a GP update. There we go. And now let's see what happens when I go to open up the contact info. It's PII, but it's part of the distribution department. It's not part of my legal department. There's a problem accessing this document. You've been denied access because of inadequate permissions. Please contact the owner of this content for assistance. Hey look, a request assistance button. And it gives me the opportunity to explain why I think I need access. Having done that, I click the send message button. It sends an email off to the owner of the content. That information is, of course, derived from NTFS. Every file has an owner. So the owner gets an email. That email includes a report that identifies exactly what the claims were, because I told it to do so. We're able to see exactly what went wrong in that request. The content owner can fix the problem and contact the person who needed access. Or contact that person and say, nope, you didn't actually need access there, and here's why. That's a great bit of functionality. The last idea I want to remind you of is the idea of file classification, because we actually saw the ability to manually classify files, and you saw some of the interesting benefits of that. But I want you to remember that there is support built into this functionality in the file classification infrastructure, FCI, Microsoft calls it, for automatic file classification. We saw that we can have rules run on a scheduled basis that will analyze files. We saw that we could do regular expression pattern matching inside of those files looking for particular pieces of content. And when we see them, we can automatically reclassify a document. So I might deliberately build a rule that searches for files looking for phone numbers. And if it sees one, says, aha, that's PII, and flips the switch. I might go look for social security numbers. I might go look for patterns that indicate credit card numbers, and flip a switch. And in so doing, trigger all sorts of interesting behavior behind the scenes, including things like changing permissions, including things like automatic RMS-based encryption to be able to keep people who aren't employees of the company from gaining access to that content. Lots of interesting benefits available there. So that brings us to the end of our discussion of dynamic access policies that applies to our central access rules and central access policies. I hope that's been helpful to you, and I look forward to the next section.